So I think I'm going to begin. I imagine that people will probably join the Zoom as I'm kind of going through and sharing what I wanted to share today. So thank you so much to those of you who are present. Just kind of a short introduction. My name is Naomi Slater, and I'd love to just tell you a little bit about what I do. So I am a Tantra intimacy coach. I work mostly with women and couples, helping them really to step back into their sexuality, discover their intimacy, step into their power and pleasure. And I use all sorts of different tools to help women and couples do that. But today, the reason I scheduled this webinar was really as a result of the attack on Israel on October 7th and my own personal process in processing that attack and dealing with all of the difficult images and stories that we were exposed to following that day. But I guess I'll first start with a little bit about my personal story in relation to that. And at the time, on October 7th, my family and I were in Israel in a place called Kibbutz Palmachim. It is in the south of Israel, on the sea, a beautiful little community. And we have been used to receiving missile attacks. This is nothing new to us, but on October 7th, that morning at 6:30 a.m., we received one of the most intense missile barrages that we have so far seen. And we didn't really understand what was going on at first because usually there's some warning. This was an unprecedented attack. And we started to see the news coming through social media, and we started, of course, to see the infiltration. And the pictures that came through in the days following the attack are really what sparked my motivation to do this webinar. And the reason for that is because we were exposed to all sorts of videos and pictures, many of which I actually didn't see because I didn't want to be exposed to them, but many of which included rape scenes. And one video in particular, which really stuck in my mind, was the picture of a young woman who was being pulled by the hair and thrown into a Jeep, and her pants were all bloodied. So it was apparent to me that she had been brutally raped. And following that day, those days, there were pictures that were posted from people that were recovering the bodies of Israeli civilians that were killed. And it was apparent that they were raped. I mean, they were recovered with their pants down. Many of them were half naked. Many of them were mutilated, both sexually and in general, limbs cut off. Zaka, which is it's an international organization that recovers bodies of people that had some sort of an unnatural death, gave their reports, and they pretty much detailed dismembering of genitals, both of men, and women's breasts were cut off. Many people were shot in their genitals, and of course raped, including girls, not just women. So this attack was very sexual in nature, unfortunately, and it left a serious trauma on the entire civilian Israeli population. And I was really struggling with the images that were coming through. And when we left Israel, we're no longer in Israel right now. When we left, I was really struggling with all of these images in my mind and not really able to process them. So it was very hard for me to process all of these images. And every time my partner started to be intimate with me, I I felt like I wasn't able to be intimate. I had too many destructive thoughts in my mind. So in the beginning, I pretty much rejected his intimacy. I would burst into tears. It was almost as if I was suffering from PTSD symptoms that I had never, that I hadn't directly experienced. I hadn't directly experienced the trauma, meaning that I wasn't the one that was raped. I wasn't the one that was violated, but I was definitely feeling this experience on so many different levels. And it was creating so much difficulty in me being intimate. And over time, I was able to really step into my body more deeply. And I'll go through the tools that I used in order to really help me step more into my presence and my pleasure, and really helped me to kind of heal myself and helped me to move some of the destructive thoughts that I had in my mind when I used these tools. So before we actually go on, I'd like to really just do a somatic practice to help us just create more presence and to ground. So for those of you with me, if you could just gently close your eyes. And we're going to take a few deep breaths, so you can take a deep inhalation and a long exhalation. And another deep inhalation, expanding the abdomen and the chest. And then a long exhalation. Now we're going to take a deep inhalation and we're going to hold the breath. We're going to hold the breath. And now exhale. Another deep inhalation. Hold the breath. And then exhale completely. Once more, deep inhalation. And then exhale. Okay, great. Okay, so let's get into a bit about the effects of trauma on our libido. So a lot of people, when they experience trauma, they go into fight or flight mode when that trauma is triggered. And what that means is that your heart rate speeds up, your breath becomes shallow, your muscles become tense. And of course, those things are not really very conducive to lovemaking. In order to have good, healthy lovemaking, you want your heart rate to be lower. You want to be deeply breathing. You want your body to be relaxed. So these are the things that you want to have present if you're going to have a good lovemaking session, and if you want to be present and relaxed when you make love. So that's one aspect. So people that have experienced trauma, it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual trauma, but any form of trauma, those people will oftentimes go into fight or flight mode when they're triggered. And that can be triggered by a sexual encounter, but it can be triggered from lots of other things. The other thing that a lot of people experience that have gone through trauma is they have a lot of destructive thought patterns when they try to be intimate. So they want to be intimate, they want to feel good, they want to feel pleasure in their body, but they have all sorts of destructive thoughts in their mind, which prevents them from being present. And if you're not present, it's very hard to connect to your pleasure. So this is what I was experiencing. I was experiencing a lot of negative, destructive thought patterns I had pictures in my mind of women being violated, and that made it impossible for me to step into my pleasure and to be present with my partner. So how do we then move from trauma to pleasure? So if we are in fight or flight mode, if we have destructive thoughts in our minds, how do we then move out of trauma and into pleasure? So there are a bunch of different tools that I wanted just to kind of lay out for you. So one of those tools is using sound. So sound is an amazing way to help us step into our body and create more presence. And how do you use sound in an intimate session? So it's really actually sound and breath together. So you take a deep inhalation, and then you release, exhale with sound. So for those of you who have given birth, um, it's really important to release sound, to open the mouth. This has a direct effect on our pelvic floor, both for men and for women. And when we're able to really breathe deeply and exhale using sound, not only does it relax our pelvic floor, but it also creates more presence and more relaxation in the body. So this is a great way to get our minds off of whatever we have in our minds that's taking us away from the intimate encounter. So connecting to our sound and our breath. Not only does sound help in the sense that it helps us open up our pelvic floor, but using our breath also helps us to stay focused on our pleasure. So we cannot have destructive thoughts in our mind and also be breathing deeply in a conscious way. So this is actually knowledge from yoga, for being a yoga teacher for about the past 20 years, is that if your mind is pulling you away from what it is you want to focus on, then you go back to your breath. You go back to deep breathing, because really your mind cannot focus fully on more than one thing. Although we see multitasking and people being able to kind of do more than one thing at once, but they're not fully focused on any of those things if they're doing many things at once. So we want to really fully focus on our breath. So taking deep inhalations, expanding the abdomen and the chest. And then taking a long exhalation, expelling the air out and using sound. So those are two really, really good tools that I used a lot in order to help bring me back to presence and relaxation. Another thing you can do is also release tension in the jaw. So we have a tendency to hold a lot of tension in the jaw as we're taking deep inhalations and long exhalations. So kind of massaging the jaw. And then exhaling. And with each exhalation is really trying to feel how our body is relaxing more deeply into our intimate encounter. Now, another thing that we can do is to create movement. So there are different ways to do this. But of course, if you are being intimate and you are either in fight or flight or being bombarded with destructive thoughts, creating movement is another way to help create presence to pleasure. So that movement can be creating slight movement in the hips. Okay, it can be very beneficial to move the hips because that moves both the energy and the blood into the pelvic area, which can help to awaken that area and create better conditions for intimacy and pleasure. So movement is one. It can be standing up movement. It can be lying down movement. So there's more than one way to do this, but movement is very beneficial. So if you're just lying down and expecting for someone else to please you, and you have all of this trauma response going on in your head and in your body, excuse me, it's going to be very hard for you to step into your pleasure. So movement is very important. Another thing that I love to teach both women and couples that work with me is different types of touch. So once we understand more about different types of touch, we understand, first of all, what it is we like and don't like, and that can change by the moment. So it doesn't mean that we always like the same type. Um, what it means is that we have a broader vocabulary for requesting touch and also for giving touch. So I would love to kind of go over some of the different types of touch so that you have these tools to work with your partner and also with yourself. So the first type of touch is called air. Actually, you know what? I'm going to start with ether. So ether is the first type of touch. Ether is actually a very energetic type of touch where you hover gently over the person's skin. So you're not actually touching, you're just hovering over. And for a lot of people, this can create some really, really nice sensations, and they can really help awaken the body to deeper pleasure. So that's ether. It's hovering over, not actually touching. Some people might not feel anything. That's okay. But some people might be very sensitive to this type of touch. And of course, you can do this anywhere over the body. The second type of touch is air. So air is using the tips of your fingers to kind of trace over the person's skin very gently, using the tips of your fingers or the tips of your nails can also feel very good to certain people. So that's air. And the third type of touch is water. So water is using the full surface of your hand. You can also use your forearm. So really kind of doing this motion over the person's body as water does. Yeah. So kind of gliding over the person's skin. That is water. The fourth type of touch is called earth. So earth is massaging. So it's kind of massaging the person's, can be shoulders, back, rear end, whatever feels good to them is massaging. That is earth touch. And then the last type of touch is called fire. Fire is fiery. It can include slapping. It can include pinching. It can include a little bit of roughness as long as it's consensual. So that is fire. So kind of smacking, pinching maybe. Yeah, that's fire. So once you have a vocabulary around the different types of touch, you can both request what it is you want to receive and also ask your partner what feels good to them. So creating vocabulary around types of touch really opens us up to stepping into more of our pleasure. So the more that we're able to communicate exactly what it is we want to receive, the more pleasure we'll experience and the more present we'll be in our body. So if we know that we're going to receive exactly what feels good to us in this particular moment, it'll be much easier for us to step into our pleasure. Okay, another thing that's really important about all of this in order to help people move from trauma into pleasure is related to communication. So it's really important to both communicate about our emotions and also communicate about what it is we want to receive and what it is we don't want to receive. So first of all, communicating about our emotions is very important. I remember when we first left Israel, I was really struggling. My partner was trying to initiate with me, and I just wasn't able to. And at first, I was kind of silent, not really wanting to share, but then I realized that I needed to share with him what I was experiencing. And I pretty much told him, that I keep having these awful pictures in my mind, and that it makes me feel as if, him starting with me makes me feel as if he wants to rape me because I have these awful pictures in my mind. Of course, that was not his intention. He's my partner. He loves me. But it was important for me to communicate to him what I was feeling, both for myself and also for him so that he could understand what I was experiencing and what I was going through. And that created a lot of empathy between us. So communicating about our emotions and also communicating about touch. So what it is we want to receive, what's going to make us feel good. So actually just the other night, I was with my partner in bed and he wanted intimacy with me, and I was feeling a bit closed off and disturbed with everything that's going on in the world. I was feeling kind of lukewarm, not completely turned off, but also not turned on. And initially, when he tried to initiate with me, he wanted to lead. And I said, okay, what is it you want to do? So he detailed to me what it is he wants to do, and I wasn't feeling it. I felt, that it just kind of made my body contract in that particular moment. I said, look, I can't agree to those things right now. But if you would like for this to work, then maybe you could let me lead and let me request from you what will help me open up and what will make me feel good. So he agreed, luckily. And I told him exactly what it is I wanted. I told him I wanted air touch on my arms and on my back. And I wanted him to gently kiss my neck. And he said, yeah, I can give you that with an open heart. I can do that. So he began to do that, and I worked with my sound and my breath, and I began moving my hips, and I was able to bring myself to a place where I felt more open, more surrendered, more relaxed. And then, of course, I was able to step more into my pleasure and be open to intimacy with him. Now, there are a few things that are important about this interaction because it's an example of a few things that I want um, to convey to you. So one is, first of all, I knew what my desires were in this interaction. So I knew exactly what I needed or wanted in order to be able to surrender more, to step into my pleasure and to feel good. So first of all, it's knowing what it is we want. What's going to make us feel good? What are our desires in any particular moment? So that's one. The second part of that was me being able to communicate my desires to him. So me being able to, um, say, well, what you essentially wanted to do doesn't feel right to me right now. But if you're willing to do this, then maybe this can work, and we can kind of work through it and see where it goes. So it was me being able to communicate my desires. So it's not enough just to know your desires. You need to know how to communicate those desires to our partners. And then the other part of it was once he started to touch me in the way that I had requested, is that I started to connect to my sound and my breath and my movement. Okay. So there were three things here that we both did that helped to create intimacy between us, even though when it started out, I wasn't really so open to it. Now, it's important that you understand that I'm not suggesting that you continue with an intimate encounter if you're not open. So, if we had gone through all of these stages and I was still not feeling open to intimacy, I would have ended it. So, we don't want to have an intimate encounter, especially penetrative intimacy, if one or both of the parties is really not open, because that essentially just creates more trauma on the existing trauma. So it's important that we are aware that even though, yes, we are doing things to try to overcome our trauma, we're doing things that are active to help shift the energy, change our thought patterns, and help us really step more into presence and pleasure in our body. If that doesn't happen for us, then we don't want to move forward with an intimate encounter because that's not going to be healthy, not for the person who feels closed off, and also not for the person who is, in the intimate encounter but doesn't really feel desired in any way. So that doesn't create good energy at all. So that's something we want to avoid. But we do want to make an effort if we are feeling turned off, if we are feeling just kind of cold in general and not feeling warm intimately. So those are things that we want to try to work through. We don't want to just say, okay, well, this is how I feel. That's the end of the story. We want to try and actively do things to change our energy and to change the encounter. Now, of course, all of this is based on the premise that we are being intimate with someone that we want to be with. Okay, so of course, if it's someone that we don't want to be with, and we've just kind of been trying to go through the motions because we have some sort of belief that we need to be with this person, but we actually don't want to be, then that's something that needs to be remedied. That's I'm not suggesting that you try to override your internal system as to whether or not you want to be with someone in general. But in my case, it was someone that I want to be with. It was my partner, someone that I love, but I was struggling with a form of trauma that I needed to work through. Okay, so that's the situation that I'm talking about here. Now, just because I told my partner that this is what I want, so I said I want him to touch me in this way and in this area of my body, and I want him to kiss me in a certain way. So just because I express my desires to him doesn't mean that he has to oblige. Okay, he could say, just as I said to him, he could say, well, I don't really want to do that. Maybe I could do part of it, or maybe we could change it a bit, and then I would also feel safe and happy in the encounter. So, what's important to understand is that we're creating consent around touch. And for people that have experienced trauma in any form, creating consent around touch is really, really important because it makes them feel safe. It makes them feel that um, nothing is going to be done to them that they don't want done to them. It helps them to surrender more deeply into their body. So, if we have an agreement between us around touch, let's say I'm the one experiencing the trauma, and I've told my partner, this I don't want you to do, but this you can do, and he agrees to that, then I feel safe. I know that he's not going to do something or touch me in a way that I don't want. So that allows me to relax. It allows me to step into my pleasure. It allows me to surrender more fully. It allows me to stop being in my mind, trying to guess what he's going to do next. Is it something that I want him to do? Is it something that I don't want him to do? Okay, so it helps us to really get over these thoughts of, um, is he going to do something that I want, or is he going to do something that I don't want? So it's really creating a lot of language and consent around touch. So when he first tried to engage me, I wasn't willing, right? So I didn't want to do what he wanted to do, and he accepted that. He didn't take it as a rejection. So a lot of people, when there isn't consent around touch, a lot of people feel rejected if, somebody doesn't want to be touched because they don't have the language to use around types of touch or creating consent, or talking about our emotions. So a lot of times people kind of go into intimate encounters blinded. It's two people with their own emotional worlds, with their own traumas, with their own ideas, and none of those things get communicated oftentimes. And that creates a lot of hard feelings, which don't get communicated in a lot of relationships. Um, so really the context is that if someone has been traumatized in any way, whether it be through a direct sexual abuse trauma, or um, just having trauma, this is something that a lot of women actually experience from having sex over and over again with someone that you love, but without actually wanting to have sex or without being ready for penetration. So these things, even if it's somebody that you're married to that you love, if this is the situation that you're in, you're essentially creating more trauma for yourself. And what you're doing is creating a tremendous amount of resentment in the relationship, even if it's not vocalized. So there was a period of my life where I was allowing my partner to penetrate me when I wasn't ready and when I didn't really want penetration. And that created a lot of resentment. I was actually holding on to a lot of repressed anger that wasn't being expressed and came out in all of these different ways, like getting upset about the fact that he didn't change the toilet paper roll. Okay, so that's actually not something that I got upset about. This is an example from another couple that I worked with. But the point is that that resentment will get funneled into the relationship in some way. So it's really, really important that you're honest and authentic with what you feel. So if you're feeling that you're not ready, then it's communicating that. If you're feeling that you're too closed off or that you don't want your partner to do something in particular to you, then you need to communicate that. If there's something that you want your partner to do to you, okay? So it's not just about communicating what you don't want, okay? For some people, that's actually easier. It's also about communicating what you do want. So it's stepping into your desires and knowing what it is you want to receive. And to know that, you have to experiment. So part of it is experimenting with types of touch. This is a really basic way to be like, oh, that feels really good. Maybe you could do more of that, or maybe you could do that in a different part of my body and see how that feels. And then, of course, giving feedback. So you can also, aside from the different types of touch, you can also specify where on the body, how you want to be positioned. So maybe you want to be standing up, maybe you want to be lying down. Yeah, so it's really being mindful that you have so many different options when it comes to expressing your desires and what it is you want to receive. And again, when someone has been traumatized in any way, what helps them move past their trauma and to process their trauma is to communicate about emotions and to create consent around touch. Okay, that's in terms of the partner in front of them. But of course, the tools that we went over in terms of sound and breath and movement, these are all tools that you can use to help you move past or work through your trauma and step into a place where you feel more pleasure and you feel more surrendered and you feel more open to receiving intimacy. So all of these things really help to keep people relaxed more. It helps them to open up, helps to really relieve a lot of anxiety that people experience around intimacy. So a lot of people are really avoidant when it comes to intimacy. If they've experienced trauma, they just kind of want to push it away. But of course, that's not good for them because all people want intimacy, even if they think they don't. They do. They just need help getting to the point where they can feel comfortable with intimacy. And for some people, that can take a long time. But these are some really incredible tools to help people step more deeply into their intimacy and more deeply into their desires, their likes, their dislikes. And of course, creating more presence in the body is going to help us step more deeply into our pleasure. So the more present we are through creating sound, breath, movement, that's going to create presence in the body. And when we're present in our body, then we're going to be better able to really experience deeper pleasure and also deeper connection with our partner. So if we're not present in our body, maybe we have all of these thoughts in our mind. Some of them may be traumatic. Some of them may be fantasy based. Okay, we might have a to-do list in our mind. There are lots of things that we could have going on in our mind that could potentially pull us away from experiencing pleasure. So the more presence we have with our partner, you can also keep your eyes open. That's another way to create presence. So instead of closing your eyes and only having an internal experience, it's opening your eyes and seeing what's being done to you, or seeing what what you're doing to your partner. Okay, so really creating that presence in the moment. So these are some amazing tools to really move from trauma to pleasure. All right, well, I would just want to thank you so much for taking part in this webinar. And you can always reach out to me. You can email me, share with me your thoughts, your experiences. And yeah, I would love to chat with you via email or WhatsApp, but most of you know where to find me. So yeah, so thank you so much for attending, and I hope to be in touch with you soon.